Kind of a question on the table is, this is fascinating. I mean, 19 months out from the election, is the Republican base, the Republican coalition, starting to disintegrate? In the last hour, we played for you the clip of this guy who's a charter member of the Tea Party Patriots, looking right into, and he's got 1 million hits on YouTube, looking right into and he runs a gun site, a YouTube site about shooting stuff. And he looks right into the camera and says, I got to ask myself the question, what have the Republicans versus the Democrats done for me in the last 15, 20 years? And he says the Republicans have done nothing. And with Obamacare, what the Democrats did for me with Obamacare, I've been able to retire from work at the age of 51. Because I can, he doesn't need the money from the work, apparently. And but he does need health insurance. And the guy's got some health challenges, and he says, hey, with Obamacare, I got my health insurance now, so I don't have to work just to get health insurance. That's kind of cool. This is, by the way, the conservatives were all hysterical about this. You'll recall, in the first 6 months or a year after Obamacare rolled out, the level of workplace worker participation in the labor force declined. In other words, it used to be that, these are just numbers I'm making up. I don't know the actual numbers, but it's probably in this ballpark. Used to be something like, 70% of the people who could potentially be in the labor market actually are in the labor market. And after Obamacare, that dropped down to 66 or 67%. And there's a dropped 2 or 3 or 4 points, what's called workforce participation. And the conservatives were like, oh my God, see, this proves Obamacare is a disaster. People aren't going to work. Well, those were the people who were only going to work in jobs that they hated to get health insurance. They had enough, means in other ways to get by in life. They just couldn't afford the $6, $8, $10, $12, $15,000 a year it costs to have health insurance. So anyhow, the asking the question, is suckers waking up? And if the suckers are waking up, what's plan B for the Republicans? Because they depend on, basically 2 things. Keeping the suckers in line by, going out and talking about, gays are going to come and get you, or, oh my God, women want abortions an hour and a half before they're supposed to give birth. It's always something to be afraid of, right? From the Republicans. You and the Republicans to tell you what to be afraid of. But the other part of their strategy, in addition to keeping people frightened, is to make sure that people on the other side, young people who might be even college educated or in the process of getting a college education, smart people, don't vote. So that older people who are drawing Social Security and Medicare and understand that these programs were brought to them by Democrats and opposed by Republicans at every turn from the beginning, older people, they don't want them to vote. And even if you've retired and you no longer have a car and therefore you no longer need a driver's license, they're going to say, sorry, you got to go down to the driver's license. Well, but I'm in a wheelchair now. Sorry, you can't vote. People to be voting. 1/3 of Social Security payments in the United States go to disabled people. Now, a lot of them aren't necessarily voters, they're children, but there's a lot of people of voting age who are drawing Social Security disability. Republicans in the House of Representatives, in the opening days of this brand new Congress here in January, Republicans in the new Congress set up a collision that could force as much as a 19% cut in Social Security disability benefits a little more than a year from now, or roughly a little more than a year from now. And when that happens, Republicans are going to, we got it. But the majority of Americans don't want that. They don't want Social Security to be cut. The majority of Americans, this extraordinary poll that was done by the Progressive Change Institute, 79% of Americans think that the government should be able to negotiate drug prices for Medicare. Our Medicare system is paying full retail because Billy Towson and his Republican buddies slipped that into Medicare Part D. with a pat on the back from George W. Bush, because the Republicans, I mean, anything that they pass into law, they're going to put a back door into it so that one of their campaign contributors can make money off it. Because for the Republicans, it's all about the money. They're serving people for whom it's all about the money, the rich, the billionaires, the big corporations, and they themselves, it's all about the money. So even though 79% of Americans think they'll be able to negotiate lower drug prices, it ain't going to happen. That students should get the same interest rate as banks. 78% of Americans say yes. That's less than one, interest rates of less than 1%. Meanwhile, I'm going to continue going through this list here as we go on, but meanwhile, in other words, America is a progressive country. It's a left-of-center country. If you poll people on issues. Now, I saw an op-ed in, I think it was the New York Times, it might have been the Washington Post yesterday, by some conservative, and he was like, the majority of Americans don't like Obamacare, and therefore, blah-de-blah-de-blah. Proves how government programs suck and all that kind of stuff. Well, it turns out the majority of Americans, if you say, do you like Obamacare or not, slightly more than 50% will say. And if you ask them why, about a third of that, slightly more than 50%, will say because it doesn't have a public option. It doesn't go far enough. It's not single-payer health care. But beyond that, if you don't ask them, do you like Obamacare, but instead you ask them, do you like the Affordable Care Act, the fact that you can't be insurance, the fact that you can get subsidies to buy insurance if you're working but have low income. Do you like that fact? The vast majority of Americans, 80, 90% say, yes, I like that. Oh, is that what Obamacare is? And see, as these people are waking up, the other strategy of the Republican Party, the one that Paul Weyrich laid out in 19, has to be brought to the fore. I mean, this is the Paul Weyrich's, frankly, our leverage in the election goes up as the voting populace goes down. That's the modern version of it. The old version of it used to be called Jim Crow. Literacy tests and poll taxes and voter challenges and refusing to register people and all this kind of stuff. And so now the Republican voting suckers are starting to wake up. And they're starting to wake up, I think, fairly quickly, in part because Hillary Clinton is out there talking about an actual progressive agenda, or at least pieces of it. I mean, this Skinner just posted this over at DU. The 7 positions Hillary Clinton laid out in Iowa. And this, I'm not in the bag for Hillary. These would be true of any Democrat. Free community college for qualified students. Expand pre-K student programs for more children, paid family leave, building on Obamacare, immigration reform, and making equal pay for women more enforceable. Pretty straightforward. So what's the response from Fox News? Well, here's what Ann Coulter had to say.
And does it bother you that your vote counts as much as somebody does not know what's going on?
More than I can say. I just think it should be, well, for one thing, a little more difficult to vote. There's nothing unconstitutional about literacy tests.
Right. Let's go back to those literacy tests where, if a white person shows up, they say, what month is it? I think it's April. Oh, yeah, okay, cool. Go vote. And then a person of color shows up and it's like, please recite word for word. And if you can do that, then it's like, well, please recite the 73rd Federalist paper. I mean, if you saw the movie Selma, you saw how this plays out. By the way, 77% of Americans want universal pre-K, another one of Clinton's positions. 75% of Americans want our trade policies changed so our jobs aren't shipped overseas. They want fair trade instead of free trade. You think we're going to get any of this stuff with Republicans in charge? None of it. Nothing.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Help me lead a national campaign to wake up the suckers who are voting Republican.